This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Business Applications podcast. This episode, we talk to special guest Mike Dickerson, CEO of ClickDimensions. This episode is brought to you by CRMUG. The user group for Dynamics 365 and CRM community is powered by users, for users, and specializes in the delivery of member-driven education, networking, and events to help you maximize your current Microsoft Dynamics investment. We thank Dynamics 365 User Group for sponsoring this episode of CRM Audio, the Microsoft Business Applications podcast. Welcome to the special episode of CRM Audio. We're joined by ClickDimensions CEO Mike Dickerson. Mike, we wanted to welcome you to the podcast, and we talk fairly regularly about different marketing topics. ClickDimensions gets mentioned by a lot of people, on a lot of guests we have. You're very widely used within the Dynamics sphere. I definitely the most common marketing automation platform we see Dynamics customers using. And so you've been the CEO of ClickDimensions about 18 months now, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And what was your life before taking on that role?
Well, before taking on this role, my life was boring and unimaginative. My immediate stint prior to this, I was at a New York Stock Exchange collaboration company called PGI, and we did all kinds of video conferencing, audio conferencing, web conferencing, and in that remit, there were two divisions. I ran the global division and did a lot of work with the Skype for Business side of Microsoft, now the Teams side of Microsoft. Prior to that posting, I spent 3 years running an email marketing business, really focused, some B2B, but very heavily B2C focused. So this is a combination of a couple things for me. One is a history of working with Microsoft, and second is a return to digital marketing.
Okay, so you kind of had digital marketing and email marketing in your blood, it sounds like.
A little bit. I think it's hard to be in business today and not have digital marketing in your blood. If you don't, I think that's probably a little bit of a challenge. And I hope that's the case, because that's part of our thesis about ClickDimensions.
Great. So first question I had for you, if you've been at like the Microsoft Business Applications Summit or read I'm sure that you and your team have read the release notes for the October release that's coming out, all 283 pages of it. But one thing that jumps out is the unified interface is getting a lot of attention. It's supposed to be at parity with the October release. So some of these things, I believe things like marketing lists and other things, are slated to be brought over to the unified interface. Where does ClickDimensions sit today with the unified interface story?
So I'll answer that probably at a couple levels, and I'll start with a little plug for James Phillips and his team at maybe 100,000 foot level. The stuff that I've seen that team attack from an architecture perspective, whether it's common data service, whether it's universal interface, these are all really, really good, sort of architectural moves that, get us excited, because you can really see how Dynamics is moving from, a combination of a bunch of legacy ERP and CRM things to something that really looks like a platform that people can build off of. So that's great. From a universal interface perspective, from our point of view, we think it's great. We have sort of two time vectors. One is what Microsoft is doing, and the second is what we're doing with our portfolio and our applications. And so, we will not be doing a ton of stuff with the 9.0 October release right away. And the reason for that is we've got some pretty substantial work going on behind the scenes right now on our own approach to user experience. And ultimately what the universal interface does is it gives us capabilities to execute some of the things that we've wanted to do for a while, but have been somewhat limited by, limited control over the UI. Basically we have, areas where we can work in iframes, but we had other areas where we could, we were, sort of hand-tied. So I think that, my answer is we see this as a very liberating move, and you will see ClickDimensions incorporating some of the opportunities as we execute on our portfolio strategy. And there's some things that we do. I think one of the things that we've done over the past 18 months is we brought in more investment in product management and user experience expertise, and have taken advantage of the fact that we've got, as you said, we've got a lot of customers out there. I think we're over 3,600 customers right now, and we're taking a look at what those customers do. We're also taking a look at what's going on in the world of digital marketing, across the board. So, I don't want to be too coy, but you'll see, some pretty significant evolutions in the way that we approach the user experience, and a lot of that has to do with taking advantage of some of the new capabilities.
Do you see other things in the business application platform coming to play here? For example, top of mind, I could imagine that Flow, with its nearly 300 connectors, could easily fit in a nurture campaign.
It could. The other place that Flow fits in, and I think this is, I don't know if this is, a novel idea, but we look at the opportunity to leverage not just Dynamics, but other parts of the Microsoft stack. And our mission is to make Microsoft technology work for marketers. And so we look at Flow as an opportunity to, solve some issues in terms of marketing team collaboration and coordination and scheduling. And we look at that as, an opportunity to, solve some other work process areas in addition to, to what you mentioned.
Anything like Power Apps in the works?
A little bit early to say, or for me to say, because there's probably somebody in our product management who's a little bit smarter on that than I am. I have a little bit of a point of view about Power Apps, but to be honest, it's I've been getting my head around what Power Apps really could mean for us, and so I think that's still a little bit unclear to me at the moment, and that's just probably more a function of where we've got our priorities today rather than the opportunity there.
All right. Well, that's great. We don't want to just talk about all the shiny new things that are coming, because there's a lot of people using ClickDimensions on multiple versions of Dynamics CRM and Dynamics 365. And what I was curious is, what do you see as trends? Because I'm sure you keep telemetry and usage metrics to see what people are actually using. So is email still king, or are the other channels catching up? Are you seeing a lot of, I know you vastly expanded the social capabilities, and are you seeing people use channels like text a lot? What are you seeing as the trends?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, just to connect the two conversations, telemetry is a lot easier as we move into the universal interface world, just saying.
Sure, definitely.
So first, to answer the obvious question, email is still the most effective, best ROI messaging channel there is. However, I would say that people compare email to text. Yes, is text growing up or increasing as a delivery channel? Yes. I'm not seeing it. It's not like it's going to eclipse email anytime soon. But one of the things that I would argue in a marketing system is that there are also some key activation channels, and I'll use that word specifically, that are not always obvious to to some people. Let me give you an example. If you're thinking about how a marketer, what they're trying to do, you can break it down into some simple concepts. You're trying to increase the number of people who are aware and might be interested of what it is that you offer. You're trying to engage in a conversation with them where they give you permission to talk to them, and then you can, nurture that conversation back and forth until they begin to get into a buying process where they're now an opportunity. And because it's B2B, you're dealing with multiple people making a buying decision. You're dealing with multiple people on the selling side. Then ultimately they become a customer, and you're trying to communicate with them while they're a customer, because maybe they can buy more stuff from you, or maybe they can become advocates and get more leads for you. Email is a channel in probably all of those, except for the very, very top of the funnel, which is when people are out there living their digital lives, and maybe they don't even know that they have a problem that you may be able to solve. So when I think about channels, there's also pay-per-click advertising and anonymous cookie pools that people are trying to purchase to be able to put their digital ads on to try and drive people to their website, where they can then use their website to convert. So my point is that when people keep citing the statistics that email is still the number one channel, that's absolutely true. But we sort of see, if you look at the customer journey from somebody who is just out there living their digital life, unaware that they have a problem that you have a solution for, as you go from that to where they're actually having a conversation with you, the importance of particular channels changes a bit. Another channel that I think is often overlooked is what goes on the website. The website still is the most important digital asset that a marketer has in the various activities that they're trying to do as they help a buyer through their customer journey. So email is still king, and if you looked at it just in terms of outbound delivery, the ROI is still by far and away the best. But what I would argue is that there are a variety of activation channels that a digital marketer needs to be aware of. And part of our job is to figure out how to make it easier for those folks to be able to access those channels all from behind one login, all built off a Dynamics platform.
Some of my background is in product management. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered, for some of the larger ISVs like yourself, how do you manage a long-term roadmap given both a dependency platform and your own internal desire to innovate on your platform? How do you sync those up, and does it limit you from being able to go too far out in the future?
It's a great question. It is something that we deal with quite a bit, and I'll show you. There is a lot of goodness that comes from the decision to build on the Microsoft platform. And here I'm not speaking about Azure. We were built natively in the Azure cloud. I'm talking about being built natively on Dynamics. There's so much good we get, but there are some constraints. So we deal with that tension consistently. And I think that I'll give you an example. The universal interface is one. Over a year ago, we had conversations with the various engineering teams about where, I think it was called UCI at the time, and we were trying to figure out, how can we get ahead of what the SDK is going to look like? How are we going to, how can we start thinking about this? Because navigation, telemetry, connection between different functional areas of our portfolio were important to us. We also have a heavy OEM strategy of being able to find, full point solutions that are part of orchestrating a digital conversation. And we're happy to take someone else's technology, reconcile it, harmonize the data, harmonize the UI. So having an advanced view of where that universal interface was going was an important thing to us. But it's tough when you're coordinating with with another company who is innovating really rapidly. So the way that we try and manage that is we compartmentalize various different things, and in some areas we have looser coupling, if you will, and in some areas we have deeper coupling. But it is there's not an answer that applies across every touch point that we have. The way that we approach data and common data service is maybe different than the way that we might approach UI or other areas. But it is it's a constant source of conversation for us. What I will also say again is that there's been a significant, from my perspective, in 18 months. I was here before the James Phillips era, and I've been here since. There has been a much more open and transparent discussion of roadmap, meaning not only things that were clearly articulated, but challenges that Microsoft was trying to solve. And so it's been easier for us to navigate that tension in the past 9 months.
Yeah,
excellent.
Definitely. So what are some of the things that you see, some of the common mistakes you see some of your customers do that maybe limit their marketing effectiveness? And the flip side of that, what are the things that your best customers are doing that everybody should emulate?
So that's a great question, and we try and look at what our best customers do. We try and look at what the customers who aren't having success do, and we try and figure out what can we do to engineer product that helps improve the chances of success. And here's the thing about marketing technology. You can't solve it just with technology. Now, our strategy is to try and figure out how to use data and machine learning and artificial intelligence to make decisions for people, suggest alternatives to increase the chances of them making a great decision. That's our goal. But here's what I see in the marketing effectiveness area. You've got 3 different areas of concern, all of which need to be operating at peak levels to really execute well. The technology, how you deliver the impression over which channel is ultimately the last mile, but it's the least important. There's a second set of skills and resources that are not technology, which is how do you orchestrate a digital journey? Do you, and this is what marketers do. They get creative and they think, how do I create content and an experience that's going to engage people when they're out living their digital life, to attract them to want to have a conversation with me? What do I do to help them when they are actually in a buying process, to help them do their buying job? How do they evaluate? How do they compare against different products? How do I do all of that? So that is an even bigger challenge, which is the skills to orchestrate that journey and the resources to actually create the content and turn the knobs and pull the levers of the various applications to execute. So that's a thing that we spent a lot of time working on, and we believe that right now you cannot solve that problem without services. Most companies, it really doesn't matter about size, don't have the internal resources and the expertise to orchestrate across all the different potential technologies that you use to have both digital and, in the B2B world, human contact. You've got lead gen reps, you've got salespeople, and so on. So we see that there's a set of problems that companies have, who have, three or our target customers, by the way, are squarely in the SMC market, and their marketing departments are not that huge. They don't have expertise across all the different touch points. So we see, them having resource constraints. So that business of skills and resource constraints is something that has to be solved with services. And in the ClickDimensions case, we look at, some level of the services we provide on our own, but we really focus on what we call a center of excellence model, which is identifying what good really looks like, trying to create standards, create pricing, and create the recipe of skill sets and actions, a playbook, if you will, that you would need to deliver services, whether it's campaign execution or other services. And we try and help our Dynamics partners who are interested build practices around that. If they don't want to build practices around it, we'll deliver. If they want to sell first and see what the demand is, great. And then if they want to get into that business, we say, come on in, take a look at what we do, how we do it, and go from there. So I talked about technology. I talked about sort of executional skills and resources. Here's one that we really don't know how to solve that ultimately is the biggest mistake that we see marketers make. And it gets down to, do they understand the customer that they're trying to sell and the value proposition of their offering? And it is difficult, when somebody comes in and says, I have a deliverability problem. My, emails aren't getting to their inbox, and you peel it back and you say, well, your content is a problem, and you're irritating the recipients, and therefore you're getting blocked. And then you peel it back one layer further, and it's because, customers often are not super crisp on what value they really provide to their customers. So that's not a problem that we've figured out how we can solve with technology yet. But very often that is the weak spot in somebody's marketing performance. So to wrap up, the companies that are doing really well are much better at understanding what their value proposition is to their particular set of customers. They understand that very well. They have skills to orchestrate the journey, whether it's to attract new people who are unaware of what they do, or whether it's to accelerate things through an active pipeline, and then ultimately they line up their technology to be able to do what essentially are one-to-one conversations at scale. Those are the three things that the guys who do it well have.
Everything you mentioned isn't a tools or a technology thing. It's a process. It's a business process. It's a marketing strategy thing. And that's, I agree 100% with that the issue that we see isn't, what I tell people is approaching a marketing automation, a ClickDimensions deployment is you got to use a different part of your brain than what you do for your, say, sales or customer service deployment, because it's not configuration and development. It's strategy and then creation of the content, be it the templates or be it the landing pages or whatever. And that's just a different part of the brain. And I commend you that your company has done a great job of creating great training resources that are available online. And so learning the tool isn't a challenge. It's the time and the strategy.
Yeah, you're right, and that, it's an interesting set of conversations that we have around that, and I think one of the things that probably over the past 18 months has been an evolution in ClickDimensions is to go from just focusing on the functionality of the code and really saying, okay. What are our marketers trying to do, and what are the barriers from them being successful? And one of the things that is exciting to us about working on the Dynamics platform, even though there's a lot of competition out there. We even have, obviously, there's a Microsoft Marketing app, but we look among. By the way, there are 7,000 other MarTech companies. But one of the things that we really looked at was, okay, if we take a point of view of what does a marketer need to be successful, and we go beyond just the code, and we take a look at the 1,000 registered partners we have, what would it take to actually solve these marketers' problems? And looked at a sort of an integrated approach between the technology that we provide, the skills and resources that a customer needs to be successful that we just talked about, and our partners, what they have as their strengths, areas of growth, of revenue growth that are potential for them, and then we try and figure out how do we solve those problems. A bunch of our effort, over the past 9 months has been really at thinking through how could we build at scale a services network to solve some of these problems that are not technology problems. And as you said, our Dynamics partners are fantastic. They tend towards the IT side of things. And so how do we help, add a different set of skills to their arsenal, if you will? And a lot of that has been, it's been a really interesting challenge. We've tried a variety of different things, and we've sort of settled on this center of excellence model as a way of doing it. And it'll be interesting to, come back 12 months from now and see, how successful we've been in that area.
That's great, and that makes a ton of sense, because that's where I see people struggling with ClickDimensions or other marketing automation platforms. It's the strategy. So I think that's a smart thing for you to do. Well, we're getting to the end of our time here, Mike. But before we wrap it up, is there any other ClickDimensions news or anything else you wanted to share for our listeners?
Yeah. So. We got a lot of stuff going on right now that I'm pretty proud of, and a couple of things that I will highlight and a couple of teases that I might give. ClickDimensions does business in 61 different countries around the world, and it's a great story of a company that started with very humble beginnings. One guy in his basement, another guy in Tel Aviv writing code in his parents' apartment, and they built a great business that I was lucky enough to land in. Through using the Dynamics partners, they, spread across the globe, but for the longest time really had, engineers in Tel Aviv and a couple of offices in the United States. It's fun to see, the global expansion now involves actually having resources in region. We've got about 15 folks in Europe now, and we're working on opening another service and support center with 30 folks. And in Asia Pac, we've got our first pioneering employees there, and we're trying to figure out where to open our first support center. In January. Got a pretty good idea where it's going to be, but so that's fun to see, that level of expansion. I think that we talked a little bit about our focus on partners, and what we really realized is that there's an opportunity for us to help our partners make a transition to new sets of revenue and new lines of business. I mean, I think ClickDimensions, in its early days, built a great partner network in large measure because Dynamics partners needed a marketing automation alternative to combat Pardot and Salesforce. The evolution really of that is to go beyond just here we fix a gap in the portfolio to saying how can we help our partners really grow new lines of business. And it's not that easy in the marketing space. I had one partner who explained to me, he said, look, when we got into the field services business, yes, we had to learn a new app, but we also had to learn a new vocabulary to talk to that part of a business, that line of business, and we had to learn a new set of competitors, but it was manageable. When it comes to marketing, that's a totally different thing. It's very far removed, as you said, or very different side of your brain is a better way to say it, from IT-oriented things that we're used to, and we have to learn this complicated and evolving, digital marketing landscape. And there's 7,000 marketing technology firms out there. This is really intimidating to us. So we hear that. We hear when it comes to services, yes, we understand our customers need these, but when we look at our top for investment initiatives in our partnership, assuming that we're big enough to do that, it's always easier for us to go into an analytics practice that's very close to our data migration sort of skill sets, and marketing always seems to fall behind. Of course, the smaller partners, and about 60% of our partners have less than 10 consultants or less, they don't necessarily have those resources. So what we learned was that we actually have to create a foundation that allows people to see that their revenue streams, test, grow, and we've got to sort of fund it and seed it. So the things that we've done with our partner certification programs and training programs, that we started off really simply with some basic onboarding and premium support services, and have now gone to production services, campaign management, and those kind of things. And down the road, analytics will be the next one that we do sometime next year. That whole business of trying to help people see how they can build new revenue streams is something that we're super excited about. And the last thing that I'll probably tease with is that we have a pretty strong vision about how we can simplify the complexity of all this marketing technology by building on the Dynamics platform. And there are a couple of key things that one needs to have in place before sort of all the pieces line up. And a key one has to do with data. So there are some interesting things that we're doing that you can expect to hear from us over the next 6 months or so. Some of which have to do with CDS, and some of which have to do with maybe things a little more strategic. That's a real core area of focus for us. So
that's intriguing, analytics and data. And now that you sent Matt Whitteman to the Netherlands, I can't get him drunk and get the secret out of him.
Oh no! You found our weak.
Now we know why you sent him to the Netherlands. Okay, so that brings up a question, because my perspective had worked with partners for a long time, over a decade here, and I think partners do an okay job from speaking from experience and other partners that I know of selling marketing automation when it's tied to something else, like there's a sales or customer service or field service initiative, and we also have a marketing thing. I haven't seen a lot be really successful with real marketing-driven initiatives selling Dynamics and ClickDimensions when there's not something else, not as also sales opportunities and other things like that. So are you seeing people being successful, in those purely marketing-driven opportunities?
No, we're seeing exactly what you see. And I think that, do I look for the day when people are buying Dynamics and buying ClickDimensions because of marketing? Yeah, but I think that's going to take a while, like maybe 5 years. And let me tell you our sort of path to get there. First of all, B2B is a very different thing than B2C marketing. That business of using human beings as part of the delivery channel, that's complex, because humans don't behave as well as packets do. And so having that coherent coherent conversation between digital touch points and human touch points is not easy to do. Dynamics offers a great platform to deal with that coherence between digital and human. So that's why we're a big fan of that. The second is data. One of the challenges that folks have is identifying end to end what really got me revenue. And in the B2B world, you've still got lots of CEOs who say, I need more sales, therefore I'm going to the VP of sales, and the VP of sales says, give me more salespeople and I'll get you more revenues. That's not true right now. Most people are shopping digitally and are doing a ton of stuff anonymously. We've all heard about the stats that 70% of the buying work is done before a company ever even talks to a sales rep. But that's just such foreign behavior from most CEOs and certainly from most VPs of sales. what we believe is that when you can have an end-to-end set of data that can actually say your dollar of revenue came from these sources. 33% of it was your salespeople, 50% was this, and whatever, 16% was that, and 1% was luck. Then you can start to really show the importance of marketing in this revenue equation more effectively. And I think that's where we're betting that Dynamics is ultimately a better data platform to get to that goal. In the meantime, the reality is that most marketers don't wake up saying, I need some Microsoft technology. If you look at the best marketing companies right now, they are using other CRMs and other technology. Part of our goal is to simplify things, show real results, not just snaz, but we are trying to put a little bit of marketing sexy around Microsoft, which otherwise is a pretty, is not the preferred brand of marketers.
Right. So, but I mean, I think the CDS and model-driven Power App story is promising for that, because you're right. I don't need a CRM system to do marketing, but a lot of what you have is built on XRM, and that can be a pure CDS app for even people that don't have, potentially, not today, but potentially down the road. So that opens up a lot of opportunities, I think.
100%. And the thing that I look at when I think about our real marketing competition is companies like HubSpot and Marketo, and I think about the challenges that they have of harmonizing data across different areas, different touch points, and we already have a head start because of XRM, ultimately CDS. We already have a head start on the toughest one, which is harmonizing data with the CRM. The second thing is that ultimately data and machine learning play a big part of this, and by virtue of using Azure and by building on the Microsoft tech stack, we get access to more core AI engineering just as a byproduct than those other companies. Microsoft spends more on R&D in that area in an afternoon than those companies spend in an entire year, and we get the benefit of that. And that's why we say our job is to make Microsoft technology work for marketers, and over the long run, we're pretty bullish on that bet.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you joining us, Mike. And this has been great. I've learned from this conversation, and appreciate your insight.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the shout out for our main man, Matt Whitteman, out there in The Hague. We know he's doing God's work, and we miss him in Atlanta, but we're glad he's where he is.
This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast. Send us your feedback at voice@crm.audio. Check out our other shows at crm.audio, or subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and any place else podcasts are offered. This podcast is a production of Dynamics Podcast, LLC.